The Arizona sky burned that evening like a furnace of copper and flame. The sun hung low over the mountains, bleeding its last light into the vast San Pedro Valley. Wind carried the sharp scent of mesquite and gunpowder. Somewhere beyond the horizon a hawk cried, the sound thin and haunting. Clara Whitfield pressed her hand against the rough wood of the fence, eyes fixed on the trail leading from Fort Bowie. The air was too still, the silence too thick. Her heart told her what her mind refused to admit. Something terrible had happened on the road. By dusk, riders came. The first horse stumbled into the yard, foam dripping from its mouth, its rider half dead. "Ambush," he gasped. "Apaches. We lost half the men." Then he fell from the saddle. Clara did not wait for orders. She was a rancher's daughter, strong of hand and stubborn of heart. The Whitfield ranch had seen sickness, raids, drought, and death, but it had not yet seen her surrender. She gathered water, bandages, and whiskey, and prepared for the wounded. When the soldiers brought the injured, she worked without rest. Torn flesh, shattered bone, the wild stench of blood, all of it she faced with steady hands. Her apron soaked red, her arms trembled only when she was out of sight. Then, near midnight, 2 soldiers dragged in another body. This one not a soldier, but a prisoner. His wrists were bound with rawhide, his chest marked with blood and dust. He was taller than any man she'd seen, his skin the color of sunburnt earth, his black hair matted but proud. The soldiers dropped him at her feet. "Found this one in the rocks," the corporal said. "One of them devils. Got winged by a bullet." Clara knelt beside the fallen warrior. The man was barely breathing. His chest rose shallowly and a dark stain spread from his shoulder. "Leave him," one of the soldiers muttered. "Not worth the effort." She looked up sharply. "Every man shot down on this land is worth tending," she said, voice low but firm. "Even if you think the Lord forgot him." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but they left her be. When they were gone, Clara fetched clean water and cloth. The Apache's eyes flickered open, black as obsidian, reflecting the flicker of the lantern light. He said nothing, only watched her with the wary gaze of a trapped animal. "I won't hurt you," she murmured, though she wasn't sure he could understand. "You're bleeding bad. Let me help." He tried to pull away, pride still alive in him despite the pain. But when she pressed the cloth to his wound, a groan escaped his lips, low, unwilling. "Shh," she said, pressing gently. "You'll live if you don't fight me." For hours she worked. When she finished, she covered him with a blanket and sat back exhausted. Outside, coyotes howled to the moon. Near dawn, his breathing changed, steady, stronger. She turned to find his eyes open again, fixed on her. This time he spoke, his English broken heavy with the rhythm of the desert. "Why? Help me?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I couldn't stand by and watch another life fade into the dust." "Not yours, not anyone's." He studied her, silent for a long time. You're brave," he said finally. Then his eyes closed once more. She didn't know his name then. Only later would she learn he was Taza, son of Nantan, a proud leader of the Chiricahua Apache, feared and hunted by every fort in the territory. For the next 2 nights, she tended him in secret. She brought him water and bread, and when he grew restless, she whispered to calm him. They spoke little, her words slow and uncertain, his few and guarded. But there was something in the air between them, something neither could name. One night, as the wind howled against the shutters, he asked, "Your people hate mine?" Clara looked into the fire. "Not all do," she said softly, "but many hate what they don't understand." He turned his head toward her. "And you? You understand?" She smiled faintly. "No, but I try." The silence that followed was deep, almost tender. When morning came, Clara stepped outside to gather fresh water. The desert stretched before her, wild, endless, alive. She thought of Taza lying in her barn, breathing the same air, a man who should have been her enemy. Yet she felt no fear. That night the stars burned brighter than she had ever seen. She brought him warm stew and found him sitting upright. Strength returned to his frame. He took the bowl with a nod, his fingers brushing hers. The touch lingered longer than either expected. They spoke until the fire burned low. He told her of his people's land, the sacred mountains, the river spirits, the songs sung to the wind. His words painted a world beyond the fences and fort walls she'd always known. "You belong to the desert," she said quietly. He looked at her with eyes that caught the starlight. So do you. When the last log turned to embers, the space between them vanished. The night was heavy with heat and longing, the kind that cannot be spoken aloud. In that moment, all the wars of men, all the hatred of tribes and settlers, dissolved like dust and rain. Clara would remember it as a night of madness or mercy, or both. A night when her heart beat with the rhythm of the drum she could not hear. By dawn he was gone. Only the blanket lay where he had slept, and beside it an eagle feather, black and gold gleaming in the early light. Clara stood there for a long time, the feather pressed to her lips. She felt the ache of something she could never name, a wound that would never fully heal. When the soldiers asked later if the Apache had died, she only said, "He's gone." The desert took him. They didn't question her again. But every morning after that, when the wind swept across the plains, Clara thought she heard a whisper in the distance, a voice carried by the sand and sky. And she knew that somewhere out there, the warrior who had once been her enemy now carried a piece of her soul through the wild, untamed land. That night, the desert remembered, and so did she. 10 years passed like dust on the wind. The war between settlers and the Apache raged on, but at the Whitfield Ranch time moved slower, quietly, stubbornly, like a mule that refused to be broken. The years had worn Clara's hands rough and her heart quiet, yet her spirit endured. On the porch each evening, she would watch her son playing beneath the setting sun. His name was Luke, a boy of about 9, strong for his age, with skin kissed bronze by the desert sun and eyes dark as obsidian. Those eyes were not her own. They belonged to another. To anyone else, Luke was the son of a widow whose husband had fallen in some nameless skirmish years back. That was the story Clara let them believe. But deep down, she knew the truth. Luke's blood ran with 2 fires, one from the white ranchers of the plains and one from the proud Apache of the mountains. The town folk whispered when she passed. "Strange boy, that one," they said. "Doesn't take after his mama." Children at the church school called him half-breed under their breath, though never loud enough for Clara to hear. Luke, for his part, didn't seem to notice or pretended not to. He was quiet, watchful, and fast as a lizard when he ran through the mesquite brush. Clara often found him by the river, crouched low, listening to the water. "It talks," he once told her. "You just have to be still long enough to hear." She smiled then, though her heart ached. He was his father's son in ways words could never explain. At night, after Luke had gone to bed, she would sit by the fire and hold the eagle feather Taza had left behind. Its edges had grown worn with years of handling, but it was her only relic of the night that had changed her life. Sometimes she dreamed of him, his quiet eyes, the way the firelight had played over his scarred face. She told herself she had buried that love with the dawn, but love is not something that buries easy in desert soil. One spring morning, a troop of cavalrymen stopped at the ranch for water. Their horses were thin and dusty, their faces drawn from weeks on patrol. Clara brought them water and bread as any good settler would. But when the captain caught sight of Luke, something sharp passed through his eyes. "That your boy?" he asked. Clara's smile didn't waver. "He is." The captain studied the child a moment longer. "Looks different," he muttered, as though the word itself carried weight. "You been out here long?" "All my life," she said simply. He nodded, but his gaze lingered. "You be careful, ma'am. There's been a Apache sign near the San Pedro. Scouts say one of their leaders rides again, a man called Taza. Some say he was dead. But the desert don't keep its dead for long." When the soldiers rode off, Clara stood frozen, the name echoing in her head like thunder rolling over the hills. Taza. For the rest of the day, she moved through her chores in silence. That night, when Luke asked her to tell him one of her desert stories, she hesitated. He loved those tales, the ones she spun about the spirits of the wind and the river, about warriors who became stars and mothers who turned into coyotes to guard their children. They were her way of keeping his father's world alive, even if he never knew it. But this night, her voice faltered. She told him instead a softer story, of a warrior who once saved a woman from dying in the sand, and how he left her with a feather that carried the sound of his heart. When she finished, Luke asked, "Did he come back?" She smiled sadly. "The desert doesn't give back what it takes." Luke thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe it doesn't take. Maybe it just keeps things safe till you're ready." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She went to the window and looked out at the horizon. The stars were sharp and cold. Somewhere out there beyond the canyons was the world Taza had returned to, the world that might one day call to her son. The following days were restless. Luke spent more time in the wild, chasing shadows through the ravines, climbing rocks like a mountain cat. He came home one evening with a piece of flint in his hand. "Found this by the old arroyo," he said. It was sharpened, like a knife. Clara took it gently from his hand, her heart beating faster. The edge was chipped in a way she recognized. Apache work. She told herself it could be anyone's, but deep down she knew better. 2 weeks later, the proof came. A rider galloped into town shouting that a ranch had been raided along the San Pedro. No one was killed, but horses were taken, and the mark left on the gate was unmistakable, a crude carving of an eagle's wing. The settlers grew restless. The soldiers at the fort prepared for retaliation, and Clara, sitting on her porch with the feather in her hand, knew what it meant. He was alive. The thought shook her. For years she had convinced herself that what happened that night was a dream, something wild, impossible, fleeting. But the desert had a memory, and it was calling to her again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Luke came running from the fields, his hair wild, eyes wide with excitement. "Ma!" he cried. "There's a man out there on the ridge. I saw him watching us." Her blood ran cold. "What kind of man?" "He had long hair," Luke said, panting, "and a scar on his shoulder." She gripped the railing of the porch, her knuckles white. "Did he hurt you?" Luke shook his head. "No, he just looked at me." Then he rode off. Clara stared out at the ridge until the last light faded. The desert was silent now, the sky heavy with storm clouds. Her mind raced. Could it be Taza, after all these years? If so, why return now, and why watch from afar instead of coming to her? Sleep did not find her that night. The wind howled against the windows, whispering words she couldn't quite hear. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled like drums in the canyon. She rose before dawn, heart heavy with memory and fear. She knew then that the quiet life she had built, the careful walls of safety and silence, were beginning to crack. Her son, the boy who bore the mark of two worlds, was now the bridge between them. And if Taza truly had returned, the past she thought buried in the desert would rise again, bringing love, danger, and destiny with it. As the first light broke over the horizon, Clara whispered to herself, "The desert never forgets," and neither, she realized, could she. The day began with smoke rising over the horizon, thin gray threads that twisted up from the far canyon, silent as breath. Clara saw it first while drawing water from the well, her hands pausing halfway. The air smelled faintly of ash and sage. Something was moving in the desert again, something old, familiar, and dangerous. By noon, word had spread across the ranching valley. The Apache were on the move. A war party had been sighted south of the San Pedro. The soldiers from Fort Bowie rode through town shouting orders, dust clouds swirling behind their horses. Men gathered rifles. Mothers pulled their children indoors. But Clara felt no fear. Only a deep, strange stirring, half dread, half longing. For 10 years she had dreamed of him only in whispers. The wind would carry his name, and the stars would sometimes take his shape. But now the signs were too many to ignore. Smoke on the ridge, a figure with a scarred shoulder watching from afar. The eagle mark carved into the wood of a raided fence. He was alive, Taza. The name filled her like a storm. That evening, while the town prepared for war, Clara made her choice. She packed a small satchel, water, bread, a pistol, and saddled her mare before the sun was gone. Luke begged to come with her, but she shook her head. "You'll stay here, my heart," she said, cupping his cheek. "If I don't return, you ride to the fort and find help. Promise me, but why are you going?" he asked, his young face pale with fear. "To stop something before it begins," she said quietly. Then she rode out into the desert. The land stretched endless before her, crimson cliffs, whispering mesquite, and a full moon that painted the sand silver. The air was still except for the distant cry of coyotes. She rode for hours, her heart hammering with every step. By midnight she reached the canyon. The smoke had faded, but the embers of a campfire glowed faintly among the rocks. She dismounted, walking carefully, pistol in hand. A shadow moved behind her. Before she could turn, a strong arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. A voice, low and fierce, spoke in her ear. Who rides into Apache land without fear? The sound of it froze her blood and then melted it all at once. She knew that voice. Even after 10 long years, Taza, she whispered. He released her slowly. The moonlight fell across his face, revealing the same sharp lines she remembered, now older, carved deeper by time. The scar over his shoulder caught the light like a silver mark. For a long moment they only stared at each other. The wind moved between them, carrying the smell of rain and sage. You should not have come, he said finally. His voice was calm, but beneath it ran a tremor, something raw, restrained. I came because the soldiers are preparing to attack, she said. They think you're raiding again. If they find your camp, they'll kill everyone. His jaw tightened. They kill whether we raid or not. I know, she whispered. But this time there's something more at stake. He frowned. What do you mean? Clara hesitated, her throat dry. She hadn't planned how to tell him, how to speak the truth that had lived like a hidden fire inside her for a decade. There's a boy, she said softly. Taza's eyes sharpened. A boy? My son, she said, her voice trembling. For a moment he said nothing. Then his gaze hardened. You came to ask me to protect him? No, her voice broke. I came because he needs to know who he is. He took a step closer. What are you saying, Clara? She looked up at him, eyes glistening. You know what I'm saying. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air before a storm. His breath came sharp. That boy, my son, he growled. The words rolled from his chest like thunder. Clara's heart hammered. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steady. Do you think he carries your blood? She whispered. The desert seemed to stop breathing. Even the wind went still. Taza looked away, staring out at the moonlit canyon. The truth was a knife twisting deep inside him. He had thought her gone forever, that the night they shared had been swallowed by war and distance. He had buried the memory beneath duty and survival, but now it rose again, alive, burning, undeniable. Finally, he turned back to her. How old? 10, she said. He was born the spring after you left. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they glimmered with something fierce and broken. And you raised him alone? I did, and the white men. They let him live among them. She smiled bitterly. They tolerated him. They never let me forget what he was. Taza's hands clenched. They called him half-breed. She nodded. Yes. He looked at her for a long time, and then, slowly, his anger began to soften. He stepped closer, his voice lower now. You should have told me. How could I? She said. The world would have torn us apart. It nearly did the first time. He looked at her, and for a heartbeat the years between them disappeared. And yet you came, he said softly. I had to, she replied. For him. For you. They stood beneath the moon, 2 lives carved from different worlds, bound by a truth neither could undo. From the canyon shadows, distant voices echoed. Apache scouts calling to one another. The camp was waking. Taza's eyes shifted toward the sound. You cannot stay here, he said. It is not safe. The soldiers will come soon. Then let me help you move them, she urged. Let me stop this before it's too late. He shook his head. This is not your fight. It is, she said fiercely. You made it mine the night you left that feather on my floor. Taza's breath caught. The fire between them, once buried, flared again, brighter than before. He reached for her hand, his fingers rough and warm. You still keep it? Every day, she whispered. He looked at her hand, trembling in his. Then perhaps the desert did not take everything from me after all. The sound of hoofbeats broke the moment. A scout appeared at the ridge, shouting something in Apache. Taza turned sharply. The soldiers, he muttered. They ride from the fort. Clara's pulse raced. Then let me warn them. Let me stop them before they reach you. He shook his head. No, they would not listen. They will not stop until they draw blood. He moved swiftly, giving orders to his men in his native tongue. The warriors scattered like shadows, preparing to vanish into the canyons. Clara grabbed his arm. Taza, what will happen to us? He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw not the warrior but the man, the one who had once whispered to her under starlight, who had touched her as if she were sacred. Whatever happens, he said quietly, the desert remembers. And so will our son. He pressed a small carved stone into her hand, an eagle in flight. Then he turned, mounting his horse. Go home, Clara, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Protect him, tell him. Tell him his father walks with the wind. She wanted to speak, to stop him, to make time bend back 10 years. But before she could, he rode off into the canyon, his warriors following behind, their forms swallowed by the rising dust. Clara stood alone beneath the vast, indifferent sky. The moon shone cold upon her face and in her palm. The carved eagle gleamed faintly, its wings spread wide, as though ready to carry two worlds on its back. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, the wind carried the echo of a growl that was half sorrow, half pride. That boy, my son. The dawn came slow and red over the canyon. A thin mist hung over the rocks, curling around the mesquite trees like smoke from an unseen fire. Clara rode hard through the valley, her heart heavy with the weight of everything she'd left unsaid. Behind her, the world she had built, the quiet ranch, the lies that kept her safe, was unraveling like a loose thread. Ahead of her lay the truth, the father of her child, alive and hunted, preparing for war once again. When she reached home, Luke was waiting by the porch, eyes wide with worry. He ran to her as soon as he saw the horse. "Ma, you're safe," he cried, clutching her arm. "I thought you weren't coming back." She dismounted slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. "I'm here, sweetheart," she said softly. "But there's something you need to know." The boy looked up, searching her face. "Is it about the man I saw on the ridge?" Her lips trembled. "Yes, it's about him." She sat him down on the steps, the morning sun spilling over their faces. For a long moment she didn't speak, afraid the truth might shatter what little peace they still had. But Luke deserved the truth, the whole of it. "Luke," she began, voice low and careful, "the man you saw isn't just some stranger. He's your father." The words hung between them, heavy as thunder. Luke blinked, confusion clouding his dark eyes. "My father? But you said—" "I know what I said," she interrupted gently. "I told you your father was gone, that he died long ago. But I wasn't ready to tell you who he really was. I was trying to protect you." He stared at her, stunned. "He's Apache?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, his name is Taza." The boy's gaze drifted to the desert beyond the fence where the red hills shimmered in the heat. "Then that's why they look at me that way," he said quietly. "The people in town. The soldiers." Clara reached for his hand. "You are no less because of your blood, Luke. You are more. You carry two worlds inside you. That's something to be proud of." But pride was not the first thing Luke felt. He rose abruptly, pulling away. "Then why did you hide it? Why make me ashamed of who I am?" She stood, tears stinging her eyes. "Because I wanted to keep you safe. The world isn't kind to those who don't fit into it neatly." He turned from her, fists clenched. "I need to see him." "Luke." He faced her, defiant. "If he's really my father, I need to see him. You said he's alive." She hesitated. She wanted to say no, to lock the door and keep him from the pain that waited beyond it. But she saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had once burned in Taza's. The desert was already calling him, just as it once called his father. "Then we go together," she said finally. By late afternoon, they were riding through the arroyos toward the canyon where Taza's people had camped. The land was alive with heat and sound, the buzzing of cicadas, the cry of distant hawks, the whisper of sand sliding down slopes. Clara kept one hand on the reins, the other resting lightly on the pistol at her hip. She wasn't sure whether she feared the soldiers more, or the truth that waited for them. When they reached the canyon mouth, two Apache scouts appeared from the rocks, bows drawn. One of them called out in his tongue. Clara raised her hands slowly. "I come to see Taza," she said. The scouts hesitated. Then, one whistled sharply. Moments later, the familiar figure appeared, tall, proud, eyes dark as the storm clouds gathering over the desert peaks. Taza dismounted from his horse and walked toward them. His gaze fell on Luke first. The boy stood straight, unflinching, though his heart raced like a wild horse. Clara dismounted and stepped forward. "Taza," she said softly. This is Luke. The warrior's face changed, hardness giving way to wonder. He studied the boy's face, the strong jaw, the eyes that mirrored his own. Luke met his gaze squarely. My mother says you're my father. Taza nodded slowly. She speaks the truth. The boy's next words came like a challenge. Then why weren't you here? Taza's eyes darkened. Because your people and mine were at war, he said simply. Because the white soldiers would have killed me if I had come near. Luke's voice shook, but he held his ground. You could have tried. The Apache leader stepped closer until he stood just a few feet away. You have your mother's courage, he said quietly. And my fire. That is a dangerous mix. Clara watched the two of them, father and son, strangers bound by blood, standing in the heart of a canyon that had seen more war than peace. Her heart ached with both pride and fear. Taza turned to her. He has a warrior's eyes, he said. He has your spirit, she replied. That night, they stayed in the camp. Clara saw the Apache families up close, their quiet dignity, the way they moved like shadows through the firelight. The women watched her with suspicion, but when they saw Luke sitting beside Taza, they softened. The boy listened as his father told stories in his native tongue, tales of the coyote and the eagle, of warriors who walked between earth and sky. Though Luke didn't understand every word, his heart did. Later, Taza placed a small bow in Luke's hands. Show me, he said. Luke hesitated, then notched an arrow and aimed at a wooden post near the fire. He drew back the string with the easy grace of instinct. The arrow flew true, striking the mark dead center. The camp fell silent for a moment before murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Taza smiled, just faintly, but it was enough to break the hardness that had lived in his face for years. You carry the strength of both our worlds, he said. That night, as the fire crackled low, Taza sat apart from the others, staring at the stars. Clara approached quietly. You see it, don't you? She said. He's meant for both sides. Taza's gaze stayed on the sky. Two rivers cannot run forever without meeting, he said. But when they do, they fight before they flow together. You think there's a war in him? She asked softly. He nodded. As there was in me, as there still is. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint sound of hoofbeats. Both of them froze. Taza rose, listening intently. Soldiers, he said grimly. Clara's stomach dropped. They've followed me. He turned to her. Then you must go. Take Luke and leave before they find the camp. She shook her head. No, I won't leave you. You must, he said, his voice fierce now. They will not spare me, or him, if they know who he is. I can talk to them, she pleaded. I can make them see reason. There is no reason between men who hate what they fear, he said quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them, throwing long shadows against the canyon walls. Finally, Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. If I take him now, he'll never forgive me for leaving you behind. Taza looked toward the horizon where the first glint of lanterns flickered in the darkness. Then let him see me as I am, he said. Not as the enemy they'll call me, but as the man who fought to keep his people alive. He placed his hand on Luke's shoulder. Remember this, my son. The desert is not divided. The wind touches all men the same. When they say you are neither one nor the other, remember, you are both. Luke's throat tightened. He nodded. I'll remember. Then, with a heavy heart, Clara mounted her horse and pulled Luke up beside her. As they rode from the canyon, she looked back one last time. Taza stood alone at the ridge, silhouetted, against the moonlight, bow in hand, his warriors melting into the rocks behind him. The soldiers were coming, and the blood that tied them all, the blood between worlds, was about to be tested by fire. The desert was quiet before dawn. holding its breath as if the land itself sensed what was coming. The wind that usually whispered through the canyons was still, and the sky above the San Pedro Valley glowed with the faintest trace of silver. Somewhere beyond those sleeping hills, soldiers were on the move, steel hooves, and vengeance heading straight for the Apache camp. Clara could feel it in her bones as she rode, Luke clutching her waist tightly. Each hoofbeat of her horse seemed to echo the pounding of her heart. She didn't speak, and neither did he. The boy's face was set, his jaw hard, his eyes fierce and unblinking. He had seen too much for one so young. When they reached the ridge overlooking the canyon, Clara pulled the reins and dismounted. The firelight below flickered faintly through the rocks, the Apache camp, still unaware of the storm about to descend. Luke slid down beside her. "We can't just leave him," he said, his voice trembling but steady. Clara looked toward the east, where a faint orange light glimmered on the horizon, the soldiers' torches. They would be there within the hour. Her mind raced. If she rode back now, she could warn Taza, but the soldiers would see her. If she stayed hidden, she'd have to watch the two worlds she loved collide in blood. "I won't let them kill him," Luke said fiercely, already reaching for the small pistol she kept tied to the saddle. She caught his wrist. "No, Luke, then what?" he cried. "You said he's my father. You said he doesn't deserve to die like an outlaw." Tears burned her eyes. "He doesn't, but if they see you, if they see us, they'll kill us too." The boy looked down the canyon again, breathing hard. "Then I'll go alone." Before she could stop him, he darted through the brush, fast as a coyote. Clara called after him, her voice strangled, but he was gone. For a moment she stood frozen, torn between fear and pride. Then she mounted her horse again and rode after him. The Apache camp stirred awake with the faintest cry of warning. Shadows moved swiftly through the tents, men grabbing bows and rifles, women gathering children. Taza stood in the center, his eyes scanning the ridge. He had felt it too, the coming fire. "Go!" he barked to his warriors. "Take the women and the young to the south path. Move now!" He turned toward his horse, but then a small figure appeared from the darkness. "Luke." Taza froze. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Luke's chest heaved. "They're coming, soldiers from the east." Taza's eyes widened. "You saw them?" The boy nodded. "They'll be here soon." For a moment, the warrior said nothing. Then, with a grim smile, he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You are your mother's courage," he said quietly. "And my fire." He looked past the ridge. The glow of torches was brighter now. He could almost hear the distant clatter of hooves. Clara arrived moments later, breathless, her hair tangled by the wind. When she saw them together, father and son side by side, her heart broke with pride and terror all at once. "Taza," she cried. "You have to go. There's too many—" He raised a hand. "It is too late to run." Then he turned to Luke, his expression calm, resolute. "You will leave with your mother?" "No," the boy said firmly. "I stay with you." Taza's jaw tightened. "You cannot fight this war, my son." "It is not yours to fight," Luke shook his head. "If it kills you, it kills a part of me too." Taza's eyes softened. For a moment, he saw not a boy but the man Luke would become. Strong, proud, carrying both bloodlines like twin flames. "Then listen to me," he said, crouching so his face was level with his son's. "A man is not made by the blood in his veins, but by the honor in his heart. Never let hate choose your path. Promise me." Luke nodded, though tears glistened in his eyes. "Good," Taza whispered. Then he rose, turning toward the ridge. "Take him, Clara. Go while you can." "I won't leave you," she said, her voice breaking. "Not again." He stepped closer, touching her cheek with rough fingers. "You already did once," he said softly, "and it saved his life. Do it again." Before she could answer, the first gunshot split the air. The soldiers poured over the ridge like a flood of steel. The Apache warriors opened fire from the rocks. The canyon erupted with the roar of battle, bullets sparking off stone, arrows whistling through the dawn. Taza grabbed his rifle and fired, his figure framed by the rising sun. The years had not dulled him. He moved with the same deadly grace as before, his voice rising over the chaos as he shouted orders. Clara clutched Luke and ducked behind the rocks. Dust filled the air. Horses screamed. Smoke stung her eyes. She looked up once and saw Taza standing tall on the ridge, rallying his men, his long hair whipping in the wind. Then suddenly he staggered, hit by a bullet that tore through his shoulder. "Taza," she screamed, running forward. He fell to one knee but waved her back. Go, he shouted. Get him out! She hesitated, every part of her screaming to reach him, but she saw Luke staring, frozen, torn between running and staying. So she grabbed her son and pulled him toward the narrow canyon trail. They rode hard, the sound of battle echoing behind them. The desert seemed to cry out with them, the wind wailing through the stones like mourning voices. When they finally reached the ridge overlooking the canyon, Clara reined in her horse and turned. Smoke rose below, black against the morning light. The soldiers were retreating, their lines broken. The Apache had vanished into the rocks, but of Taza there was no sign. She waited, heart pounding, eyes scouring the canyon floor for movement. Then through the haze she saw him standing tall atop the ridge, bow in hand, blood dark on his shoulder. For one heartbeat their eyes met across the distance. He lifted his hand, palm open, the same gesture he had made the night he left her long ago. Then the dust swallowed him and he was gone. Weeks passed. The soldiers left the valley in defeat, the Apache melting deeper into the mountains. Life at the Whitfield Ranch returned to its quiet rhythm. But for Clara and Luke, nothing was the same. One evening, Luke found her sitting by the porch, staring at the horizon where the sun bled into the earth. Do you think he's still alive? The boy asked. Clara smiled faintly. The desert doesn't kill its own, she said. It just hides them until they're needed again. Luke nodded slowly, looking out at the endless plains. I want to go back one day, he said, to learn about him, about where I come from. You will? She said softly. And when you do, remember, he never left you. Not really. He glanced at her hand where she still held the small carved eagle. That was his, wasn't it? She placed it in his palm. Now it's yours. The boy closed his fingers around it, feeling the weight of two worlds resting in his hand. As the sun sank behind the hills, a lone eagle soared overhead, its cry echoing across the valley. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and rain, the scent that always followed Taza. Clara smiled through her tears. He's watching, she whispered. He always will. Years later, Luke would return to that land as a man. He built a home between the mountains and the plains, where white and Apache children learned side by side. He taught them that courage was not in color or tribe, but in the heart that could love beyond them. And when the wind swept through the canyons at dusk, those who listened closely swore they could hear it, a voice deep and strong, carried on the breath of the desert, that boy, my son,